Hey, what's up, Nashville? I am Beau Beach. Welcome back to the podcast. I will tell you, we are filming this very early this morning, as life and business do. We've been real busy. So we came in early, have not yet had an energy drink, and we're just going to power through this together. So perhaps you're listening on your way to the office and trying to get right. We're going to get right together on today's podcast. So let's get into the stories. Of course, we're trying to catch you up on the last 2 weeks of commercial real estate news in Nashville. We try to bring you stories that are informative, that speak to greater market trends. And then we try to bring you some stories that we think you'll like and be entertained by. But what we're going to do is keep it moving, right? So let's get started. Developer scraps plans for Midtown site. And this isn't just any Midtown site. This is one of the most prominent, most expensive real estate developments in Nashville. Hines had envisioned a sprawling mixed-use project on the former dealership site. One of Nashville's most coveted development sites is back on the market. Houston-based Hines is abandoning its plan for a 2.7 million square foot mixed-use development on the site of Jim Reed's former Midtown car dealership. They spent a whopping $32 million acquiring about 5 acres of the larger Jim Reed automotive site all the way back in 2021. So eye-popping numbers, right? 32 million for a portion of the Jim Reed site, not the entire Jim Reed site, a portion of it. They've been carrying 32 million in acquisition costs, plus all of the soft costs that have rung up since then for the last 5 years. So anybody that thinks development is an easy business should call me and we will have a no nonsense conversation and get you put back in the right headspace. Very, very difficult. You've definitely got to have a lot of cash on the sideline in order to survive many of these deals. Luckily, Hines is one of the more reputable developers in the country, if not planet Earth. So they've been able to weather the storm. But if they can't get this deal developed, there's very few folks that can. Hines' deal for the property was one of the several high-profile purchases of Midtown development sites, including Lee Beeman's former dealership property that closed in 21 and 22, the peak years of Nashville's real estate frenzy. And I will tell you, they were the peak years in terms of land acquisitions, right? Those were the years where people decided, hey, maybe my property is worth more for the underlying land than it is the current use. And we're still not really over that mentality. Even though the market has shifted, there is great demand for commercial property in Nashville. I would tell you that the high-priced land segment has fallen off. So many of those properties that were once considered to be trading for their underlying land value, those properties will now trade for the existing value of the improvements, right? Whatever's there today is probably what that property will trade for, not a inflated value of the underlying land. We're still having a hard time getting that through to folks, but nevertheless, it will happen. It's going to be quite some time before most properties get back to that 2021 and 2022 pricing, especially for land value. The development included the former historical Coca-Cola bottling plant at 1525 Church Street. The land was tangled in lawsuits for most of 2021. So, not to get in too much of this, there was an existing car dealership on the site that was a tenant, and that tenant thought they had the right to purchase a portion of that property. That's why Hines didn't buy it all at first, right? They only bought a portion of it while the rest of that site was entangled by lawsuits. Eventually, there was an agreement that would allow Heinz to go ahead and purchase the remainder of the Jim Reed site. They ultimately chose not to do so. So the moment had kind of passed, which is rough if you're the owner of that land. You had a buyer at the peak, but your tenant cost you that deal by entangling it in lawsuits. Now the moment has passed, and the owner of that land is going to have to wait a little bit longer. The intent here was to develop the Reed District property with 8 towers, including office buildings, apartments, a hotel, and an adaptive reuse of the vintage Coca-Cola plant. The firm is now seeking to sell the property with entitlements, right? Which is with approval, government approval to build those things. So anytime you have land plus entitlements, that land is worth more, right? Because you've really saved the buyer a lot of work and a lot of expense to get those projects approved. The towers, the approvals in place for the towers are from 30 to 35 stories, so a massive, massive project. It'll be interesting to see how they need to carve this site up. I think it's unlikely that one buyer swoops in and buys all 5 acres. They might have to parcel it out tower by tower. I'm sure they're trying to work through those options now. Next door, IBP Properties has broken ground on the first phase of its 3-tower development called the Motley. The firm bought its Midtown project site, the former dairy factory site, adjacent to Heinz property, for a collective $80 million in 2022. Brentwood-based GBT Realty and Monarch Alternate Capital bought Beeman's former dealership property in December 2021, a month after Heinz made its first purchase for $110 million. So we are talking about very, very expensive land. So I think this speaks to a trend that we've discussed on the pod many times, in that very expensive land in 21, 22, it got put on hold in 23, 24, 25 because the banks stopped lending, interest rates were going up. There was a general uneasiness in the country, a lot of it coming from the leadership at the federal level. We all thought, hey, we get Biden out of office, we get Trump into office, the interest rates start coming down, which they've had. The economy has improved, which it has. A lot of these projects still haven't been able to find a way through, right? And many of them, including Heinz, who is competent as it gets and is capitalized as it gets. If a group like that can't make the 5 acres work, I think it's going to be very difficult to make it work. But we're seeing this very, very expensive land means very, very big, expensive developments on that land to justify the price. Those are projects that have been delayed, and now you're even seeing more and more of those projects coming back to the market to be resold, having a hard time getting resold. Some of them do. I mean, this is not a doom and gloom podcast. This is not impossible. We're still one of the top markets in the country, right? And the economic situation, the interest rate situation continues to improve. So there will be a way through this. But I would hate to be these guys that have been carrying this high priced land for 5 years now. Let's keep moving. Edley's plans a new restaurant concept. Thought this was interesting. Most people know of Edley's Barbecue. They are now introducing Edley's Tacos. The restaurant group is known for its brands Edley's Barbecue and Pancho and Lefty's Cantina. Edley's Tacos appears to be taking over the Sylvan Park Pancho and Lefty's space at 4501 Murphy Road. Edley's Barbecue was founded in 2011 and operates in 11 locations across Tennessee and Illinois. So first I will say Edley's Barbecue, not my kind of barbecue. I understand it's kind of fancy barbecue. I would tell you that, it's kind of, what do they call it? Elevated. It's elevated barbecue at elevated prices. But it seems to me that Edley's Tacos is an effort to kind of rebrand the Pancho and Lefty's locations. So I imagine one by one, Pancho and Lefty's will be replaced with Edley's Tacos, which from a branding perspective, I think makes sense. Any type of brand recognition you have from your barbecue concept should now extend to your tacos concept. Both of those, tacos and barbecue, are kind of thought to be high margin food items, right? Where your food cost is low, which makes things easier, similar to like a pizza restaurant, right? Where the ingredients to a pizza are very inexpensive. So every pizza you sell, you've got a high margin in that product. At least at one time, the same was said about barbecue and taco concepts. I don't know if that's true. I've never aspired to be in the food business, but it makes sense to me. So Edley's rebranding Pancho and Lefty's as Edley's Tacos, and probably using that process as a means to fine tune the menu, the offering, and how it's kind of positioned in the market. Excuse me. Let me get some energy drink here. I have a hopeless addiction to caffeine, and I just much prefer energy drinks at this point over coffee, which I drink over ice. It's only so much black coffee a guy can drink. Target eyes a new Nashville store in Century Farms. It's a 150,000 square foot location in the heart of the $1 billion development. It is going to occupy a 14-acre parcel. The property is owned by Nashville-based Old Acre McDonald, the lead developer of the Century Farms development. Old Acre McDonald paid $5.54 million for the site, as well as several neighboring properties in 2015. Again, you acquired in 2015, it's 2026. You've been carrying that property for over 10 years before you ultimately get that deal done with the target. The development business is not an easy business. There is high upside, but there is an extreme amount of risk, cash flow risk, is the way I would look at it. Across the street from the site is where In-N-Out is planning its new location. In-N-Out, by the way, just opened its Franklin location yesterday. It didn't seem to be too crazy, certainly throughout the day. After, rush hour, it got a little bit crazier. But I happened to be in Murfreesboro this past weekend with my family, and my children talked me into going to In-N-Out. So we went to the Murfreesboro location. It's like, wow, that is a trip going to these In-N-Outs. There are people everywhere. There are people sitting, there are people standing, and there are 30 to 40 people working, and they are on top of each other. I mean, the kitchen space at an In-N-Out is not real spacious. And I'm telling you, they've got 30 people packed in there. They are shoulder to shoulder. So they are shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen, and they are shoulder to shoulder in the dining room. And it's just not my scene. I don't need to be that close to people. I'm not trying to fight for a table, but I don't know if that's the norm always at In-N-Out. Perhaps it is, and my children are going to make me go, and I'm just going to be tortured. But I'm hopeful that things will normalize and it will be easier to get in and out of those locations after a period of time. Big supporter of In-N-Out. I like the owner. I like their plan to relocate their new headquarters to Franklin. They made a big commitment to do so. The amount of money they paid for the land on which they built their headquarters in their first Franklin location was a eye-popping price. But a Christian family that does everything the right way, trying to escape California, whether or not they want to be totally honest about that or not, because they've got so many business interests still there. They can't burn that bridge. But nevertheless, they are certainly diversifying out of California. The owners are moving out of California, and they are establishing a new headquarters in Franklin. So got to support In-N-Out. But the amount of people that are packed into a single In-N-Out is still kind of eye-popping. The $1 billion Century Farms development spans more than 300 acres and is already home to Tanger Outlets, the team headquarters of Nashville Soccer Club, and more than 1,200 residential units. So admittedly, I have not spent a lot of time at Century Farms. I know my family has. We've always kind of said, hey, we should go there and explore everything they have when we have time. We just haven't done so yet. But I hear very, very positive things about Century Farms and where it's located. That's definitely a project that uplifts that area and gives it perhaps a different image, which I'm sure everyone is happy about. Let's keep moving. You probably heard about this story. Acme owner seeks meeting with mayor to address tax concerns. Tom Morales says his annual tax payment, this is property tax, has increased from $129,000 to $600,000. Notes the future of his restaurant business is now uncertain. And what makes this even more painful, and maybe you all don't understand this, Tom Morales does not own the property that he operates his Acme feed and seed business from. He's a tenant who has signed a triple net lease, which means he pays the landlord, the owner of the property, a base rent. Above the base rent, he's responsible for his insurance cost. He's responsible for all of the maintenance, and he's responsible for paying the real estate taxes, right? So those are all passed through to him. To imagine having a real estate tax bill for a property that you don't even own go from $129,000 to $600,000. And this is in Nashville, Tennessee, supposedly located within a red state with low taxes. That is outrageous and hard for any business to make do with. And the problem is, you know, our mayor gave some comments in response to this, and they were just the dumbest responses ever. We're seeing this everywhere with these blue mayors, with these blue governors, where they think there is just no end to what they can charge people without them responding. You know, we're seeing it with the great exodus of California now by just threatening to vote on a billionaire asset seizure. You know, you're seeing it in New York City with Mondami. You know, they just think that they can tax people anything they want without them responding by leaving. I mean, that's the beautiful part of our system here in the United States. We're United States, where we've got 50 United States, each with its own set of rules, regulations, and taxes. So one can move from state to state to avoid burdensome taxes. You know, the idea that we don't recognize that business owners are going to make logical decisions about how much they're going to allow the government to steal from them, I think is just madness. And there might be a reckoning coming for Nashville. Nashville-based restaurateur Tom Morales may be required to close his Lower Broadway business, Acme Feed and Seed, due to property tax concerns. This is at 101 Broadway. Lester Turner and Curry Thornton own the structure and lease to Morales, who operates Acme, on a triple net lease. As such, Morales pays the annual property taxes, maintenance, insurance, as we just discussed. Morales said the $600,000 property tax bill he now faces exceeds his rent payment and his net profit combined. When asked about this, O'Connell, the mayor of Nashville, said, "It's not up to me whether Morales keeps that business open. The market evolves. New businesses start even as beloved old businesses close." How tone deaf is that? A beloved business should close if it's not cool with the government stealing more money from it. So tone deaf, so anti-business. They are now working to create a group of property owners to form a property tax coalition with the goal to change the way property tax appeals are heard in Nashville. quote, it shouldn't take over a year for an appeal to be heard. He wants the mayor's office to appoint an additional board for assessment appeals to expedite the appeals process. So they think the appropriate response, right? The local business owners think the appropriate response is to create a new position that would more quickly hear appeals to property taxes. Now, a final quote from our genius mayor. So it's not up to me whether he is going to keep that business open. It's up to him as a property owner to determine how to capture the value that's inherent in the property. That is so dumb because, number one, he does not own the property. He's not the property owner. In the idea that the property owner should be able to capture some value that's inherent in the property when the real estate taxes that he has to pass through to the tenant, or he prefer to pass through the tenant, have just gone up 5x. You are going to have to lower the rent that you charge for that space because now the property taxes are so outrageous. The base rent plus insurance plus maintenance plus property taxes is too high for any business. So if you can't lower the property taxes, you can't lower the maintenance, and you can't lower the insurance, the only thing you can lower is the base rent. So it actually is going to very much hurt the property owner. Increased property taxes hurt the property owner and hurt the tenant. But in this situation, he's responding to the tenant as if he's the property owner. He's responding to a beloved local establishment that says, you know what, if you can't pay it, someone will, so just move on. And that is just the opposite of everything that Tennessee stands for, in my opinion. And it's just a shameful response to a clear problem that we're going to have to contend with in Nashville is property taxes. Property taxes have really gotten out of control. I hear there is some discussion at the state level to limit the annual increases in property taxes from year to year, so they can't go up 500%. I heard that they've are throwing around the idea of a 2% annual increase, right? So you don't have these huge property tax shocks, which makes sense to me. Even if it isn't 2%, maybe they're starting low, hoping to negotiate. But 500% is not sustainable for hardly any business, and they should recognize that. Next, a Kane Brown theme bar is coming to Broadway. Kane Brown, somebody that I've always thought was a pretty good guy. He's actually got a basketball court in his house. And a group of guys were headed that way to play some ball. I got invited to go, but I had already played that day, and this old body can't play twice in one day, so I turned it down. But everything that I've heard about Kane Brown has been positive. Seems like a real normal guy. He's getting a bar, right? Which means he's licensing his name to be used as a bar and taking a percentage of all the revenue that's received there, right? So he's not the owner of the bar. He's someone that's licensing his name just like everybody else downtown. He will partner with Detroit-based Elia Group for Kane Brown's on Broadway in the former Valentine's space. It's scheduled to open this summer at 312 Broadway. It's 4 levels and over 11,000 square feet. The owner of the property paid $10 million for the building in 2017, right? So he's partnering with the group that will be the tenant, right? So you've got an owner, you've got a tenant, and then you've got the tenant signing a licensing deal with Kane Brown to use his name and likeness to sell more beer. Next, a spring start is eyed for the $450 million Rivergate Mall site project, which is interesting because we've got 2 properties located very near the former Rivergate Mall. We've got a third coming, so I've been kind of tracking the progress and what's planned here, and it'll be nice to actually see some progress. It's one thing to say it's happening, and it's another thing for potential buyers to see it happening, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing something happen. Cincinnati-based real estate company Maris announced Tuesday it will begin demolition in the spring. Development will continue in phases through the early 2030s. The company recently paid $27 million for a 3-parcel portion of the North Davidson County site. The former mall opened in 1971. It has also paid $6.2 million for another property needed for the effort. So Maris has about $33 million invested in 4 different parcels that are not the entire mall site, but a portion of it. The future development will offer approximately 700 apartment units, 100 townhomes, 80 independent senior living housing units, buildings with more than 130,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, a center green and plaza for community programming, and new roads and utilities. Maris landed a loan of $36 million from Nashville-based Pinnacle Bank. The project is supported by tax incremental financing, also known as TIF, benefit packages from both Metro Nashville and the city of Goodlettsville. Maris said, "Our focus is taking a property designed for a different era and reimagining it as a walkable, active district where people can live, work, gather, and spend time. It's a significant reinvestment and one we believe can make a lasting difference for the area." And I will tell you, it's long overdue, right? It took some time to put all of that together, but the Rivergate Mall site has been on a downward trend for many, many years. And anytime like the trophy property in a submarket, that submarket basically exists around the mall site. The trophy property in the middle is failing. That has negative pressure on all the surrounding properties. And you can kind of see that, that whole area has gotten tired. And this is going to be how it gets jump started. The question is going to be, how long does it take, right? Can we get other buyers interested in other parcels around that site knowing what's coming? Or is it still too early? Are they still skeptical, right? Because it could be a situation like we discussed with Hines, right? Where Hines announces this massive development. And if you were to go out and buy some neighboring parcels thinking you were going to benefit, rising tides lift all boats type of mentality. And then 5 years later, Hines still hasn't broken ground. Perhaps you regret being a little bit early, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Rivergate Mall site and how early other buyers kind of join the party. I hope sooner than later, because we're marketing a number of assets over there with more coming. So here's a story for you on some of the stats on who's living downtown in Nashville. So I'm a Franklin guy. Admittedly, I only get downtown for work or if my kids need to get there. I don't get there much. I don't have a good pulse on the day-to-day market for who lives there. So let me bring you up to date and we'll get educated together. Downtown is now home to about 22,000 people. 1,400 residential units were delivered last year, with those downtown residences offering a 93% occupancy rate. So 2025 was good for landlords. There are buildings under construction to offer another 3,000 units, with another 10,000 planned after that. So all kinds of units in the pipeline and an extreme amount of units planned, right? That includes, sites like Hines and then the neighboring sites that they've got these big 35 story towers planned. That's how you get to 10,000 additional units. The real test is what's under construction. So we delivered 1,400 new units last year. We're looking at 3,000 this year with another potential 10,000 approved. Downtown is defined by the boundaries of the interstate inner loop, Jefferson Street on the north, and the Cumberland River on the east. The 22,000 downtown residents live in about 15,000 total units. About 40% of Nashville's commercial leasing activity stem from downtown buildings. In addition, while representing only less than 1% of Davidson County's land area, downtown generated 12% of its property taxes and 18% of its retail taxes. Nashville ranks second in visitor recovery post-COVID, third in resident recovery, and fourth in worker recovery. So downtown is actually performing very well. Don't tell that to some of the Class A office landlords that have had to sell to buyers who want to repurpose those buildings. Downtown Nashville has a 16% office vacancy rate, with its Class A building vacancy rate at even higher 21%. Roughly 88,000 people work downtown on a daily basis. About 140 retail businesses have either opened or announced last year. And cherry on top, there are over 7,000 dogs living downtown, which I think is amusing. I have a child right now that is just begging for a dog. And we are swatting that request away because we are in a season of life where we don't have any extra damn time for a dog or any extra damn energy for a dog. So I hope she's listening. But 7,000 dogs living downtown in 15,000 units. 1 out of every 2 downtown liver has a dog. It just, well, I guess people have multiple dogs, which skews the numbers, but that seems like a whole lot of dogs for an urban environment to me. You are a glutton for punishment if every time your dog has to go to the bathroom, you got to get in the elevator, go down to the ground floor, walk, do this, do that. I mean, that is a big commitment. And I'm surprised that so many people would sign themselves up for that type of obligation in an urban environment like that. But 7,000 dogs downtown, y'all, that seems like a crazy stat to me. We've got 3 more stories to cover today, and then we're going to wrap this up. An East Nashville property once eyed for a project sells for $8 million. The seller takes a $4 million loss on the raw land sitting adjacent to the ex-Lincoln Tech campus planned for a makeover. The previous transaction price of almost 10 years ago. The 3 acres of raw land with an address of 1003 Douglas Avenue once accommodated a student housing structure serving Lincoln Tech. The new owner of the property is Nashville-based Southern Land Company, already owning the former Lincoln Tech campus. They seek to reinvent the overall site with a development to offer multiple buildings ranging from 3 to 7 floors. They are planning 800 multifamily homes, 150 single-family homes, and about 300,000 square feet of commercial space. The previous owner had considered a 5-story building with 300 units and a 420-space parking garage. Relatedly, Southern Land Company also just paid $1.85 million for a 2-parcel property located adjacent to the just sold raw land. So Southern Land Company has very patient money. You know, they've got, I think, a lot of money, you know, judging by some of their other projects. So they've been very patiently assembling more and more land on that Lincoln Tech campus. This seller clearly did not have the same amount of capital or the same amount of patience, because rather than waiting until the market allowed them to develop this property, they said, nah, let's just get out right now. 10 years later for a $4 million loss. Can you imagine? Can you imagine carrying that type of property, cash flow negative property, for 10 years only to lose $4 million more on the sale? I mean, it's really hard to wrap your mind around how that is the best available option. You know, you never know someone's personal situation, but that is a big haircut to take. The mall at Green Hills is set for an update. So you probably heard some headlines about this. I think they were misleading. You know, Simon came out and said, hey, we're going to spend $250 million on some of our malls to improve them. You know, and I think a lot of people thought, hey, they're going to spend $250 million on the mall at Green Hills. That's not true. I mean, that's an inflated price tag, number one, but that's multiple properties that they're giving that to. So what do they have actually planned? at the Green Hills Mall, and in my opinion, very underwhelming. Not a big fan of the Green Hills Mall. I try not to go there, but the Green Hills Mall is being given a grand two-story flagship statement entrance with interior enhancements also planned. The mall last underwent a major update in 2019. The mall at Green Hills traces its history to 1955 when it opened as an open-air retail strip center. You know, am I supposed to get excited about a two-story flagship statement entrance? I'm not. You know what I would like? How about a place to sit? Have you ever been to the Green Hills Mall? They have no chairs. There's no couches. There's no chairs. They want you to be on your feet shopping, or they want you to leave. There's nowhere to rest. If you're the dad and just chasing your family around, there is no way to rest and chill. There's no food court. There's no food hall. There's very poor food options. So for me, from an experience perspective, I don't care about the Gucci store. I don't care about the Rolex store or whatever else is there. None of that does it for me. Tell me about the experience. Can I show up and not suffer the entire time? Can I show up and find a place to buy my kids something to eat when they need a snack? No, they're standing, walking, and shopping and leaving. That's all the only options you get. Okay, well, I'm out. So I think what happens at the Green Hills Mall, it's not really a mall mall where you go to hang. It's not a mall where you go to just pass time. Mall walking, excuse me, mall walking, especially for younger kids, is kind of a pastime, right? Well, I don't think that happens at Green Hills, and perhaps that is the entire intent. But I think that the experience at Green Hills is very, very subpar, and Green Hills Mall is very overhyped, and I just don't get it. So I'm going to bring you one last story. This isn't technically Nashville. This is a concept that is looking for a location in Nashville, but I think the concept itself is interesting enough to present. Texas-based Home Run Dugout eyes Nashville. With a mission of being the leading baseball entertainment concept, they built their first batting bay in Austin about a decade ago. Now, with a prominent Nashville native in its investor pool, the company is eyeing Music City. We invented this ground-up pitching machine like a dad soft-tossing the baseball to you. This is our biggest differentiator. Next, they turned an underperforming concession stand at Dell Diamond Stadium into a bar restaurant with 2 batting bays. In 2019, Home Run Dugout opened its flagship location in Katy, Texas, offering 12 batting bays, a bar, restaurant, and live music. So I think of this as some of the golf concepts, like a top golf concept, where you've got your own bay where you're whacking balls in a gamified version of golf. This is a comparable concept, except instead of golf, it's baseball. It's very approachable. The ball is just getting lobbed up. Everybody can whack it. They gamify it. They give you food. They give you drinks. They set it up so it's kind of a party like Top Golf. And before I had read this article, I'd never heard of this attempting to be done with baseball. I'm not a huge baseball guy, but if you're going to lob some balls up and I get to just crush them like I'm some home run hitter, I think that sounds more fun than hitting golf balls for me. Home Run Dugout is eyeing cities with Major League Baseball teams as well as tourist destinations, which of course where Nashville would fall. In 2025, Nashville native and Dodgers player Mookie Betts joined Home Run Dugout as an investor and brand ambassador. I will tell you another local guy that I met, very, very good guy, very down-to-earth guy, good basketball player. I happened to play basketball with him as well, but a guy that does a lot for children, donates a lot of money to different programs around Nashville. Mookie Betts is not one of these big head guys that's unapproachable. He's a very down-to-earth, seemingly very generous guy. They're trying to get 3 more locations in the next 18 months in scale from there, Nashville being one of those 3 locations in the next 18 months. So a golf copycat with baseball lob balls, which is interesting to me. It's not like it's a pitching machine where that thing's coming down the pipe at 60 miles an hour and you really got to get your hips turned and you got to get going. Now we're going to lob this thing up. We're going to make it as slow as you want it to be so you can give this thing a whack. And I think that's a very fun concept. So we appreciate you all tuning in to the podcast. Of course, I am Beau Beach, the commercial real estate broker at Beechwood Commercial Real Estate. We represent sellers of commercial real estate in Nashville and the Southeast. I would love the opportunity to speak with you if you're someone that owns commercial real estate and is trying to sort out the market today for your specific property. We have all kinds of free information available to you. Step 1, just reach out, start the conversation, and we will go from there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, this has been the What You Need to Know podcast.